What's up, everybody? Welcome into another brand new week, another brand new edition of the Bearcast on SicEm365.com. Brought to you by Burt Colchin Ford. In Waco since 1936, Ford's the number one selling truck in Texas, 43 years running. Also brought to you by WellMed Medical Management, USMD Health System, Dallas. And I am Craig Smoak, SicEm365 radio host, also team reporter, joined by Grayson Grundhoefer, SicEm365 team and recruiting reporter, also director of broadcasting. Want to welcome Armstrong Sims back to the podcast this week as well. He was away for a few days, but rejoined us on air on Monday and is now back with the podcast this week. But big thank you to Jack McKenzie for all of his hard work over the last week. He was having to kind of juggle a lot of balls at once, but did a great job. So thanks to him for filling in last week. And we've got a lot to discuss. A lot of sports coming to a close over the last few days. The spring semester starting to wind up. And, here pretty soon we're about to enter that desert period of really what will be pretty much football recruiting news for about 3 months, because all the sports are going to be shut down with, just season's coming to a close, Grayson, and that was certainly the case this past weekend. But before we get into actual details and what's going on, just how you doing this week?
Yeah, I'm doing good. It was obviously kind of one of those bittersweet weekends where everything's coming to an end, but also you have to look back and remember success and the things that these sports did achieve during the season. So that was obviously really cool, of course. For me, covering recruiting, a huge recruiting win for Baylor over the week as well. So it's been a good week, and like you said, it's about to be a little bit of a dead period coming up for us. A lot of recruiting news, a lot of football talk, and kind of predictions, projections, things like that coming up. But it was nice to continue to see real sports as these seasons come to an end.
Yeah, and then when I say slow down, I just mean purely from a games standpoint. Yep. Just the fact that, seasons are winding down, but there will be plenty of recruiting. And with the changes in the women's basketball program, there will be plenty to cover there as they shape out their roster. There's still lots of things going on with that. Tennis will have to reload and do some things with that roster now that their season is over, and so on and so forth. So there will still be plenty of activity. It's just that the actual games themselves, we're going to kind of put to bed for a little while in most cases. So let's cover kind of how we got there. But first, commitment for football over the last week. This kind of just ran timing-wise weird with our podcast last week, so we didn't get a chance to talk about him. But Baylor did add to their what are we on now, 2022, 2023?
Well, he'd be 2021.
2021, we're still on 2021.
He counts towards, the scholarships for that.
Yeah, so over the last week, the 2021 class adding another member, Jacob Gaul, committing to Baylor, as he gives them a commit for 2021, which is dating back to the class that actually signed this past February, I should say, and December, because now we're on to the 2022. So Grayson, in talking about him, kind of explained that aspect, how he counts backwards, but also Jacob Gaul. What's he bring to the table for this 2021 Baylor Bears recruiting class?
Yeah, so it's the exact same situation with Siaki Ika, Drew Estrada, now Jacob Gaul, and, of course, Grant Miller. So they all count towards the 2021 class, right, because they're the group of guys that you're bringing in for this upcoming season. And so they take up a scholarship. It's the same way a JUCO kid counts. It's the same way you can make early enrollees count towards 2020 as well, if you're able to do that, at least for your scholarship roster construction purposes. So Jacob Gaul, like I said, he'll count towards that class, of course. This is a huge pickup, though. I mean, this is one that we definitely have to take some time to think about, because 6'2", 305 pounds, he's coming from a program where they had a lot of success on the offensive side. Very, very successful season. Top 5 in points per game. Top 5 in rushing yards per game. They averaged 43 points, 287 rushing yards. Only gave up 1 sack the entire season. So, obviously, Baylor's not getting their entire offensive line. They're only getting one player from it, but it's a pretty darn good player. A guy who PFF graded as the #1 left guard in the entire country. Yes, you could say that some of that had to do with his level of competition he was playing at. But the other part about it is he just put himself in the right position to go out, make plays, and make his team better. And if you're able to do that, you're able to be pretty successful along the offensive line. So he's going to come in. I spent some time talking to him after he committed. Center looks like the position he's destined for, which makes sense at 305 pounds. I was a little concerned with his ability to play guard, at least in the Big 12. Usually guys are a little bit bigger in the Big 12. You're talking 315-ish is usually your guard. 305 to 310 is usually your center. So I do believe that this is a good spot for him. I think this is going to be a very nice transition. I'll also mention Buffalo did run their version of the wide zone. So he does have some knowledge about the scheme that Jeff Grimes and Eric Mateos are bringing to the fold, which I think bodes really well for him and was a huge reason why he decided to choose Baylor, because he felt very comfortable with that scheme, very comfortable with the coaches. And also, I know a lot of people have been asking me, and it was something that I was able to get some information on from him, but a lot of people were wondering who Baylor was really competing with to land him. And he told me specifically Purdue and Maryland were two of them. He also said that some Pac-12 schools made up offers as well. He only had, I think, 6 offers at the end of the day, but he did say a lot of that had to do with the fact that he basically ruled teams out for a variety of reasons, whether he didn't feel like he was the top priority or whether he just didn't think it was a good cultural fit for him. So I do think if he had stayed around in the portal longer, he would have gotten more offers. But at the end of the day, 6 Power 5 offers, and I would say, a few of those are pretty competitive. You have to win those type of battles to land guys like this, and Baylor was able to do that, and Coach Mateos with a big recruiting win.
Yep, so Buffalo transfer Jacob Gaul. His head coach is now the head coach at Kansas, so you're wondering why leave Buffalo or what might have precipitated that in some ways. Head coaching change, so he starts to look around, and now he'll face his former head coach in Big 12 play whenever Baylor plays the Kansas Jayhawks. So we'll see how that goes, but he was on the air with us the day of his commitment. And either the day of or like the day after, whatever it was. I think we were one of the first ones to talk to him. And
you were the first. Yeah, you were.
Yeah.
It was the day of.
Yeah.
Because Smokey and I were both trying to get a hold of him. So, yeah, it was day of. Y'all had the first interview.
So we got him pretty much right after he made his commitment. And that's when he did let us know that they had been talking to him about playing center primarily. So, Grayson, we know there's been a problem at center now for the last, 2 or 3 seasons. They just haven't been able to get the production they would like consistently from Xavier Newman-Johnson. They've tried just different things, and it's just not really worked the last couple of seasons. It definitely didn't, work very well last year. Jason Moore coming in there and playing a lot of center with Newman-Johnson, and then they get the Grant Miller commitment, and it seemed like he was destined for center, but now what? What do you think this means for Grant Miller and Jacob Gaul, and kind of what are we looking at with the offensive line? I mean, it seems as though really left tackle set, and I don't know, everything else seems to be kind of up for grabs at this point. 4 out of the 5 starting positions there on that offensive line.
Yeah, so looking at their frames, I mean, Grant Miller is about, I think everyone's been saying 6'4", 311, somewhere in there, 311, 315, somewhere in there, which to me is just a little bit better size for a guard. And so I think that's where he's going to end up. But, Craig, you're right. It's kind of a weird situation because he was brought in to play center. He was not brought in to play other positions. He was brought in to be the center. And for whatever reason, he just didn't, really take that position this spring. And I think that I'm not saying that that's an indictment on him. I just don't think they really sat there and said, okay, we have a surefire all-conference type center. So there's an area to improve. And honestly, the other big part about this is it's hard to pick and choose when you're recruiting guys out of the portal. You have to find talent. That's the bottom line. You have to find talent. And Jacob Gaul happens to be a very good talent, and he also happens to play center. And so I think that, and I know he played left guard this year, but after talking to him, it is very clear his natural position is center. He just had to play left guard because of injuries, where he was brought in at Buffalo. They had an established center, Mike Nowitzki, who's getting recruited heavily by a lot of Power 5 programs as well as a transfer. So I think it was just the situation he was in. But at the end of the day, he's a center. Baylor took the best player available out of the portal. Again, he happens to play center. So I think that moves Grant Miller to guard. And, hopefully he's able to be okay with that and adapt to that and kind of run with it because they need both those guys to play. They need both of them to play well and be big contributors along the offensive line. And we've talked about how big the center position is, the importance of it. And I think in this wide zone scheme, especially, and just kind of trying to bring in a scheme to a new program, the more guys you have that are familiar with it, I think the better it can be and the more effective it can be. And Jacob Gaul talked about coming in and really being a guy who wants to be a leader immediately, a guy who can teach these younger guys the offense quicker. And he also mentioned the wide zone is tough. It's something that takes time to learn. And so hopefully he can help that learning curve a little bit, get guys more comfortable with it, and therefore make the offensive line better. So this is a huge pickup. Baylor needed it. I still think they could go out and land another transfer as well. I still think there's some areas, some holes on the offensive line, but I think they addressed a need on the interior with Jacob Gaul.
So Jacob Gaul, former Buffalo offensive lineman, now a member of the Baylor Bears as of last week, coming over through that transfer portal, and will, probably be the starting center next year. I mean, I guess if anything, you'll have good depth at center, probably the best depth you've had at center in quite some time, I would think, just in terms of quality. And, even with, I would imagine Miller can probably play some, and then you got Gaul, and then you'd still have Xavier Newman-Johnson, and you'd still have Jason Moore. And so,
Moore retired.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Moore retired. Okay, but still, though, you're still three deep at the very least at center.
And Phillips. I know Casey Phillips ran some there as well.
Yeah, so you got good depth, and hopefully you can find a couple guys out of there that can be solid for you. I mean, that would go a long way if they could just start at the center spot and move outwards, because that's been, a problem. So big pickup there with Jacob Gaul. So they've hit the transfer portal a couple times now this offseason for offensive linemen.
Yeah, they have, and they've been able to really develop at least some depth, at least, some guys that can come in and contribute and be starters. So that's big. I do want to address one thing, Craig, before we move on. I know a lot of people have been hesitant, saying, why would you move someone who played left guard at such a high level to center? What's the purpose of that? Is he really going to be an upgrade there if you're putting him at a weird position? Everyone's having terrible flashbacks to Jake from Morgan, having to play center after being right tackle. Jake Burton last year having to play guard when he was a tackle as well. I get it. A lot of people having bad flashbacks, and I understand it. I totally understand it. But when it comes to Gaul, he literally told me that he started in center all through high school.
Yeah.
He went to Buffalo, was the backup center his entire career at Buffalo. He just started at left guard because of the guys ahead of him, but he really is confident in the position. He told me he feels more comfortable there than the guard spot. So that should give Baylor fans a little assurance that at least he's going to come in and play his best position, which maybe hasn't been the case for guys in the past.
Yep, so don't get too hand-wringy over this because of the reasons he just mentioned. He mentioned that to us last week, and that's why I haven't really thought about it much. I mean, I haven't been all that concerned with, Grant Miller, and I haven't been all that concerned. I mean, as far as I'm not worried about, what this means or whatever. I just want them to find offensive linemen and put them in spots. I don't care how it gets done. I don't care who it shuffles over or who it pisses off. I really don't. You know what I mean? It's just find an offensive line. I mean, at this point, that's just whatever you have to do. And so, I'm excited about the addition of Jacob Gaul. So that's where we are with, the new additions or the latest on new additions. I have to mention this. I saw a random tweet, I guess it was a couple of days ago, from Keith Tejada, Raleigh's father. And, we were talking, I don't know if it was on this show or maybe it was Paul and I last week. We were talking about Jared Atkinson. Did we talk about that on the podcast last week?
We did.
Well, random alarm going off. Okay, we'll get to that in just a second then. But Keith Tejada, I was talking to Paul about this, I suppose, and I was like, yeah, I think he's the last guy. He might not, and I just couldn't remember Raleigh. I just wasn't thinking of Raleigh. So Raleigh's technically the last man standing from 2016 in that class. And Keith actually posted a photo, and man, what a throwback photo this is. Art Briles in his element, like at about the 50-yard line at McLean Stadium. It's got 2015 Russell Athletic Bowl champs on the ribbon board. So this was probably one of the last few pictures taken, quite frankly. And then it's got the 2016 class, and it says Raleigh's the last of 2016 original signees. Perseverance, discipline, determination, commitment, embracing and adjusting to change. 4 head coaches and 5 cornerbacks coaches later, he is still a Bear. Thank you, Baylor. That's just crazy to me, and I had to stop and just kind of think about that, and then stop it and looking at the actual picture. But 4 head coaches during his career, 5 cornerbacks coaches. And then you look at this picture, and I mean, there's Art in his element, so that's just weird now to look at. But then there's Patrick Hudson next to Bravion Roy, next to I can't tell everybody because I mean even the picture looks outdated already. It's like because it's 5 years ago. So already the picture
Rhoades on there.
Well, yeah, he's at the very end. Yeah. So it's like Hudson, Bravion, looks like Denzel maybe, Cam Martin, got Davion Hall, Chris Miller, Raleigh, Grayland, J.P. Urquidez.
Duvernay on there?
I don't see Duvernay, but he might just be obstructed by some. But like, yeah, man, is that not wild though to go back and look at? I mean, Urquidez and Hudson and Cam Martin, and it's just wild, dude. So yeah, Raleigh's the last man standing of the 2016 class. I just think that's a cool and kind of bittersweet note in a way as well. That he's gone through so many coaches, 9 coaches altogether if you count head coaches and position coaches in his time at Baylor. So that's just kind of wild. But the reason he is the last man standing is because Jared Atkinson announced that he is leaving the program. Man, it's been just a roller coaster for him. Came in as he was a highly touted guy from like the developmental, like he could be really good standpoint. He wasn't like highly rated just purely based off what he was, doing in high school. It was one of those like, oh, Briles and a wide receiver, you automatically think that guy's going to end up probably being pretty good, and you trust that evaluation, right? And, then there's a change with coaches, obviously, which changes offenses, which changes everything. And Jared got kind of probably lost in the shuffle a bit, while other guys, would go on to thrive, like your Denzel Mimses and those types of guys. And then, of course, just the sad battle that his mom's had for a long time now with cancer. That took him away from school for a year, a couple years back, Grayson. And then he returned to Baylor. And, that could have been the end of the road there for him, but he did end up coming back. Had like a big catch last year. I mean, made a couple plays here and there, but, never really got into a groove, never really got into the routine of week in and week out having to be accounted for or being regularly in the lineup. So it just didn't work out that way for him. And so he has announced that he is going to be leaving Baylor. I don't know what's, in his future as far as football or, what his plans are even really. But obviously he's going to be somewhere else if he suits up. So your thoughts on Jared Atkinson? A lot of time spent on, potential and just life and whatever, not quite allowing him to live up to that potential.
Yeah, I mean, the crazy thing for him was he actually, by the end of things in his recruitment, he was the 3rd highest rated guy in that class.
That is crazy.
Behind Bravion Roy and Zach Smith.
Goes to show you, man, these rankings sometimes it can be very just all kind of over the place.
He was ahead of Denzel Mims by 1 spot in the class, which is just really interesting. Yeah. And he was the highest rated 247 ranked player. So composite-wise, he was 3rd. But as far as his 247 ranking, he was a top 150 player in the nation, according to his ranking, which would make him the highest. He was a 94 4-star, according to 247. So pretty interesting to look back on that. You look at the talent in that class, and he was 3rd. So interesting to see that. It just never came to fruition. Unfortunately, there were a lot of factors that went into that. I think that the scheme, obviously, his game probably fit Browse's offense better.
Sure.
But on the flip side, I'm not really sure that he would have turned into. I mean, you have to remember, if you're going back to 2016, you see Jared Atkinson, you see Denzel Mims, but the 2017 class probably would have brought in more talent. You know what I mean? They never had a problem recruiting wide receivers.
No.
So
I mean, they were on paper. They were scheduled to bring in Duvernay, and they were scheduled to
Right.
bring in Hezekiah Jones and Jamon Osmond.
Right.
Now, I still think that, like, looking back on that, Osmond and Mond were probably not going to end up. Maybe Mond was, but Osmond probably was not going to end up in that class anyways. Kind of like Baron Browning.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they were going to probably recruit over him.
and then they would have found
Yeah.
another highly rated guy. So, yeah, I mean, it just, you would have seen more flashes if he was really going to turn into a big-time performer in the Big 12. It never really happened for him. It's too bad because he did have a lot of talent. He oozed with potential, much like Mims. I mean, he was a little more filled out than Mims. He was already right around, 195 when he came into Baylor. Mims was probably 170 soaking wet. But, yeah, I mean, it's too bad. Unfortunate circumstances, like I said. And you hate to see it because this year wasn't going to count against Baylor scholarships. It was just, a guy who's been with Baylor for a long time who you'd love to see finish up at Baylor, even though I know he already graduated. He already has his degree and all that. So he's a Bear. He's a Bear through and through, and I'm happy for him. I hope he gets an opportunity to go put up some big numbers at another school, and I hope he gets another chance to go and try to compete for a starting role, which is something he probably wouldn't have gotten at Baylor.
Yep, so he went through a lot, scheme changes, like you said, coaching changes, personal life stuff with his mother and her cancer battle. And so, yeah, best wishes to Jared Atkinson. I think his mother, Mo, is a sweet, sweet lady, and his father's cool too. So, yeah, best wishes to the whole family, and hopefully they keep in touch and all of that. But, yeah, Jared Atkinson no longer with the program. So that leaves Riley Tejada as that final last man standing when it comes to the class of 2016. But that is, if you followed recruiting back then and you see that picture, it's just wild. There's so many stories in that picture alone. But there you go. So Jacob Gaul in, Jared Atkinson out, and now Grayson, it's time for some guys to move in, right? I mean, we're going to start having freshmen and transfers and those guys making their way to campus here in the not-so-distant future.
Yep, that's coming this weekend. The guys are going to report. Jacob Gaul will be in that group as well. And the guys who did not early enroll, of course, this means the whole team's reporting. But for a lot of guys, that means moving in. Other guys were able to early enroll. So you're going to see Monterey Baldwin, Cameron Bonner, Cisco Caston, Dakota Doyle Robinson, Jordan Jenkins, Cooper Lands, Ryan Lingyell, Jackie Marshall, Romario Noel, Tate Williams, and Tevin Williams all arrive this weekend. It'll be a really, really good thing for them, a good experience. They'll get to move into their dorms, figure out class schedules because summer 1 starts June 2nd. So it's a quick turnaround. You got to get in, move in, figure out where you're living. And then, of course, school starts up and summer workouts. So it's going to be a quick adjustment period, quick turnaround, but really exciting. The guys are going to be on campus. The full team will finally be there for the 2021 season.
Yeah, so they will get to working out and getting classes going, like you said, which, yeah, you got a week basically to move here, move in, get situated, and then start going to class and start working out and doing all that stuff. So, man, it's certainly not what I did. I mean, I know these athletes get a lot as far as treatment, but they also give a lot as well. But that whole, basically graduating high school and then turning around a week later and getting college started, it's a big commitment, man. That's not something that everybody's built for. So who are you most excited to see get on campus? Who do you think's coming in that's, going to create some buzz maybe early rather than later, and maybe even – we always kind of overrate, and I mean just everybody in general overrate freshmen to a large extent. They're new, they're fresh, they're young, and so everybody gets excited for them. But who could you see potentially as well coming in and maybe even seeing some time?
Well, easy answer is Jacob Gaul, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna definitely go with some freshmen here. We all know Gaul is, yes, he's going to make an impact. He's going to have to play. But if I'm looking at kind of the guys that they've brought in, I would definitely say you have to look at positions that really did not stand out this spring and look at areas where Baylor could maybe improve or maybe bring in someone who could come in and see early playing time, maybe not even redshirt. And so for me, I'm going to start with the running back position. This spring was really not a confidence booster for me at the running back spot. I mean, a lot of guys with injuries, a lot of guys not getting downhill quickly.
Grayson, what do you mean the best running back by the end of spring was a guy who didn't start spring at running back and is a linebacker?
I know.
Why is there any reason for concern?
Right, and that's just baffling to me. And maybe Abram has just locked it down so that this addition doesn't even really matter for this year. But as Squirrel's trying to work his way back, you know what Ebner is. He's not an every down back. He's more of an offensive weapon who you're going to give the ball to. You need power. You need a guy who can be a workhorse back. Abram Smith came in, and it looks like he might have the inside track to that spot. But, I mean, if Jordan Jenkins can come in and really establish himself in the offense and really show what he can do and just prove that he can really just get the ball and get downhill and just cut up field, find the hole, read your blocks, and be able to create positive gains, there's a chance that he could have an impact as a true freshman. We'll see. I'm hopeful still that Quaylon Jones, Tate McWilliams, and Jonah White will get it all together and figure it out. But I do think Jenkins is going to add some competition. I'll also add, I think everyone is excited about Tate Williams. I'm very excited about Tate Williams. I think he could come in and be a guy who pushes guys on the offensive line. My only concern with him is he's still 270 pounds, and that just is not big enough yet to be a starter. He's really going to have to work on putting weight on if he wants to compete this upcoming season and putting good weight on as well while also trying to pick up the scheme. I hate offensive linemen starting as true freshmen, and I don't think that's going to happen. But I do think that there's a lot of excitement to see him get on campus and possibly make an impact early in his career, even if it's not his true freshman season.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a handful of these guys already. They partook in the spring. Guys like Javon Gibson and a few Elijah Bean and
Devin Lemire.
Yeah, Devin Lemire was already out there as well.
Drones.
But and Kyron Drones. But they'll be bringing in some new faces, so it'll be exciting to see Tate Williams. Although don't get too crazy about him right away out of the gates, because like you said, I mean, the only time you get really super excited about, I think, a freshman offensive lineman is if you're Alabama and you got like the 5-star number 1 rated left tackle that's pretty much ready to play in the NFL in 2 years. Right. You know what I mean? But outside of that, typically they take some time to develop. So definitely don't tone down expectations entirely. But he is a freshman, but he should help. And they need all the help they can get, as we've been outlining quite a bit. But, yeah, Jordan Jenkins, excited to see. Yeah, he might not have thought that. I mean, I'm sure in his head he thought I could come in and compete right away. I mean, that's why these guys are where they are. They had that mindset. But, if you do look at the running back output last year and what happened this spring, then it's entirely possible a true freshman could walk in and do the right things and end up playing a heck of a lot at running back right away. So we will see if that's in the cards for the young man from Lindale who got his team to a state championship game, although they fell short. But, the new class moving in. So 2021, getting into the dorms and getting into that football life, and we will see those guys around sooner rather than later. What else football-wise? Recruiting, anything to kind of touch on at all? It's kind of we're in that weird transition phase right now, sort of like the end of the semester and the start of the summer, and it's just kind of a funky time period because it's like the last little breath that everybody can take before basically restarting the long haul, as these young men are going to start later on this week. But anything recruiting-wise on the radar at all?
Yeah, so just one thing I want to mention right now, if you're looking at the numbers right now, Baylor is full. Their class is full.
They're at
Their
85.
roster is full. They're at 85. So I guess my point in saying this is I do believe they will still add another addition or two to the roster. And yes, you can take that for what it's worth. That does mean I believe that there will be some attrition. And I do believe they will still be able to add a player or two to the roster. I don't think it's going to be, again, it's not going to be mass exodus. I just think it happens in the offseason. You'll have guys who make decisions, whether it's to move on or whether it's just to maybe just move on from football or move on to another school or whatnot. But with the transfer portal, there is still lots of opportunities for that to happen. And so I do think that it will still happen. Probably, I don't know when, but sometime during the summer. And I do think Baylor will still have room to add another player or two. They'll make the numbers work. That's just my read on the situation right now. So I don't think this is the full roster. I don't think this is it. I think they will have another player or two added before the 2021 season. That's the main recruiting news. Obviously, there's a lot coming up because camps are coming up in June. Official visits, we're 3 weeks out from the first official visit. And then obviously it's 2 weekends back to back. So big weekends coming up for this Baylor football program. A big month. The month of June is huge for Baylor football going forward. And they're in a good spot right now in the 2022 class. 2023 is still kind of building. I think that they could start seeing a little more momentum on that end in the next month or two as well. Maybe get a commitment or two in 2023, which would be great, a great start to the class. And that's kind of where they're at on the recruiting end. I think the transfer portal obviously has been taking up a lot of their time and a lot of the attention because, you want to be good in 2021. That's the singular focus while also trying to prepare for future classes.
Yeah, it kind of feels like a fork in the road season because I feel like with what all happened last year, there's sort of a mulligan in some ways, like not entirely because obviously changes had to be made, but it was understandable that things weren't great right out of the gates. But I feel like now everybody's kind of hit the reset button and people want to go to Baylor. There's definitely some recruiting battles they can win and some attention that they can get, but they got to win games. That's bottom line what it comes down to. Like, there's so many things that are working in their favor. The one thing that's not outside of just the NCAA stuff, which at this point is it's drug out so long that I don't even think most prospects are even aware of it unless the opposing coach mentions it to him, which I'm sure Gary Patterson or, Steve Sarkisian or whoever does on occasion. But outside of that, which should have some sort of a resolution like before the year's over with, and I just say that because I'm going to stop predicting like it happening anytime soon, but it should happen before the year's over with. I think that's long enough to give the NCAA to finally do that. Outside of that, it's just winning, man. That's all it is. And quite frankly, what I'm saying is I don't even know how much that's even factoring in. So really, just win, and this program will be in great shape because the attention's there. The coaches are well liked. The brand's pretty hot right now. It's just, can you prove that you can win and do it consistently? And so pretty big year, I think, coming up for them. Obviously for Aranda coming off the, tough first year, it's big for him just to have a big second year. There's a lot of people that still doubt him. I saw, all these various, polls and things. And some of them are by Ricky Joe in Tulsa, putting them up and, 1 billion people are responding because that's what they do on the internet, I guess, is argue over stupid stuff. But, there's a lot of people that think that Aranda's not the guy or that he's not a good enough head coach or whatever, and they're basing it off of just what they saw last year, which is all we have to base it off of. So, he's got a lot to prove, but just program-wise, I know it sounds simple to say, well, winning matters, but I just really feel like this is a crucial kind of a turning point for them this year.
You're not wrong, and I think the staff feels that way as well. I think this is a huge year, and it's really massive from a, like you said, confidence from the fans in Dave Aranda. It's a confidence by recruits in where the Baylor program is going because right now I mean, recruits, especially defensive recruits, they're ready to roll. I mean, they think that this program is really going to continue going to another level. Dave Aranda's put a lot of guys in the NFL. A lot of excitement there. Now, can the offense catch up a little bit? Can the wins catch up? And thus, can the recruitment continue to catch up? Yep, it's massive. That's a great point.
Yep, so there we are with football. Guys moving in here over the next few days. Recruiting just continuing on. We're going to have camps and things to talk about at some point, which will be kind of wild. But there are other things going on outside of just football. Let's go to baseball, where they're fighting for, well, their postseason lives, quite frankly. What seemed like a, foregone conclusion maybe last week, 2 weeks ago, surely. Foregone conclusion was they were going to be in the postseason. And now you look up, and as a result of losing their last home series to Oklahoma this past weekend, dropping 2 out of 3, the Baylor baseball team starts to get ready for Big 12 tournament play, and they draw Texas Tech now in their very first game. And, if you were, solidly in, then maybe you wouldn't sweat having Texas Tech out of the gates right too much. But the fact of the matter is you start to look at various projections, and the latest one that came down just yesterday, Grayson, has them as the very last team number 64 out of 64 in the tournament, squarely on the bubble. And that's all just, they've kind of been flirting with it, but now they've, firmly flirted with it, and they're in a tough situation now. And on top of that, adding insult to injury of just not really having a whole lot of momentum as the season winds down. Get news yesterday from Kendall Rogers over at Perfect Game that Baylor will be without starting pitchers Tyler Thomas due to COVID protocols, as well as Blake Helton, who suffered a minor arm injury. They will be out for this week's Big 12 tournament. Also, third baseman Esteban Cardozo-Oquendo is doubtful to play in Oklahoma City as well. Thomas and Helton are expected to be back for the regional round if Baylor gets to the regional round, because that's now a big question mark, Grayson. So Texas Tech coming up in the Big 12 tournament and squarely a bubble team, and Thomas is out and Helton is out for at least the time being, and your third baseman's out. And how are you feeling about Baylor baseball right now?
Yeah, it's nerve-wracking, isn't it? Because if they go into the Big 12 tournament and they lose both games, they're out. I think they're out.
I think they might be, yeah.
Yeah, I think you can. I really do. I think they're done. Their season's over if they lose both these games. So I'm really curious to see how they come out and try to handle, I guess, this pitching situation. So you said it's Helton and Thomas, right?
They're both out for the tournament, yeah.
Right. So you're basically, you look at the pitching rotation, and you have Hayden Kettler and Cam Cayley as, I think, the two guys who are probably going to start the first 2 games of this tournament. So, I would think that they're going to pitch Cam Cayley this first game just because he was their Friday guy last weekend, so he has enough time to rest. And then you pitch Kettler the second game, whether it's do or die, really, or it's in the second round of the Big 12 tournament, you're in. But, yeah, it's not a great position to be in. The good news is the max, or the fewest amount of games you're going to play is 2. So at least you know that you have 2 starting pitchers who you feel okay about going in and possibly winning you a game. So you look at the tournament, the draw is Texas Tech, like you said. If they win or lose that game, they play the winner or loser of TCU versus Kansas State. So, if they lose this game and somehow Kansas State beats TCU again like they did over the weekend, and Baylor has to play TCU, a team that swept them really badly in the regular season, that's going to be a really, really tough draw. Or, hey, Baylor could just go in and just decide to go win the whole thing and get squarely in the tournament. That's a possibility as well. But I think the greater possibility is they come out, probably lose this game to Tech and then play Kansas State in a do-or-die game, in a game that I think they definitely can win, in a game that they're probably going to have to win. So they've made a lot tougher on themselves.
Yeah, they have.
They've really, and this has happened a few times. 2019 is standing out to me because it happened then as well, where they played Texas Tech and Oklahoma State late in the year and just completely collapsed. This year, Oklahoma State and Oklahoma collapsed again. Now, at least they won a game in both series, but still losing a series to Oklahoma at home when you know you can submit yourself in the tournament. It's a really shocking performance, and now they have a lot of work to do. So we'll see what happens over the weekend. Yes,
we will. But, yeah, they got off to that Oklahoma series. They got the win in game one. You felt good, and then proceeded to drop the next two. So this is why they are where they are. It'll be 9 a.m. Coming up tomorrow morning for Baylor Baseball versus Texas Tech. So 9 a.m. Wednesday morning out at Chickasaw Bricktown Ballpark in Oklahoma City. Baylor and Texas Tech to kick off the Big 12 baseball tournament and perhaps kick off the last weekend of Baylor baseball for 2021, or perhaps just the start of the postseason run for Baylor baseball in 2021. That's what we'll find out starting tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, Lady Bears, Nicki Collen still kind of putting things, getting ducks in a row. Grayson with this roster, we're kind of seeing some of it take shape, but still kind of in a holding pattern in many ways. I think we're going to get some clarity on, the futures of Bill Brock and Cydia Messer here pretty soon on, who might be back with the Bears next year. And I know they've thrown out some offers here recently, but still just kind of waiting for some finalizing of the staff. And I think once we get that, then can kind of start to work on that roster a bit as well for the Lady Bears.
Yeah, and a lot of work to do on the roster. So they have a long way to go before we're going to really know what this women's basketball team is going to look like next season, and that's okay. It's transition. It's a new time period, and we'll see what Nicki Collen and her staff can do.
Yeah, so kind of waiting in a holding pattern, like I mentioned, with the Lady Bears. Meanwhile, for the men, the national champion men's basketball team, got the NBA draft right around the corner. We know that Davion Mitchell is going to be, selected fairly highly and is a likely almost concrete first-round pick that you would think at this point. But a couple of guys who have, been, I guess, involved with the draft process, whatever that even looks like right now, but have not, officially decided what they're doing just yet, is Matthew Meyer and also Jared Butler. And we're getting to the point now where it's about time to make a decision. So we will see these guys go the NBA route, or we will see them potentially come back to Waco for another year. I mean, with Matthew Meyer, I certainly was just kind of expecting him all along to be back next season with a much bigger role and an opportunity to really, open some more eyes, but also understand the NBA chatter about him and his potential. Jared Butler, I mean, really it's just a health question. I guess that's maybe the hiccup here. But your thoughts on those two young men and upcoming decisions to be made?
Yeah, I believe June 30th is the date. I think that they have to announce whether they're going to enter the draft or not. So another layer to this, which could drag this situation out even longer, is they can still enter the draft but not hire an agent.
Well, that's what they've done. I mean, that's what Matthew Meyer did.
Right. So what I'm saying is he could go through the process, though, and still come back. So
that's what he's doing.
So it could linger all the way till mid-July.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that situation. But on the flip side, Jared Butler hasn't announced anything.
Right.
So, I mean, we're just kind of – it's a wait-and-see mode. Obviously, if he comes back to Baylor, Baylor should be the preseason #1 team in the entire nation, which would be crazy. I mean – I still think he goes. He's going to be a first-round pick according to pretty much every mock draft I've seen. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. Obviously, there's other areas of concern like his health, which we've talked about. So we'll see if that is something that was a big problem in this process, or if he just was having a tough time deciding if he wanted to go ahead and make the move or not. So I don't know. It's really cool to think about. I mean, because if he does come back, he's got an opportunity to be the greatest Baylor athlete of all time, which is pretty crazy to think about, crazy to talk about.
To think about and talk about.
But if he does come back, and they make another run, they don't even have to win a championship. If they make another Final Four, and he's Big 12, Player of the Year, or first team All Big 12, I mean, he's probably the greatest Baylor athlete ever, college-wise, which is again pretty awesome. So we'll see how that decision ends up. I do think he'll enter the draft. I do think he'll end up being a draft pick. But again, it's pretty, I know every fan is probably thinking, oh my gosh, if Jared Butler comes back, could be another magical season, even though they're going to be dang good whether he stays or goes.
Yeah, I'm expecting him to go. I think whatever needs to be cleared up will probably be cleared up. It has been really quiet, though. I mean, it's been like oddly quiet, just because you hear a lot about Davion Mitchell, and I know he's made it official and Butler hasn't, but I mean, Butler's a potential first-round pick, and to not really hear a whole lot about him is just awfully strange. So it's been weirdly quiet for a guy who you think would be getting tons of attention right now. But, yeah, I mean, there's still a few more weeks to play out with this thing, but we will see with Matthew Meyer and Jared Butler a little bit more time to decide what they will actually do when it comes to playing basketball next year. But that decision's not too far away. I mean, we're almost halfway through 2021 already.
Yeah,
imagine
crazy.
that. Pretty crazy. So that's what's going on with Baylor men's basketball. Still waiting word on the NBA draft and the impact that could potentially have. Softball wrapped up their season this past weekend, and I mean, this was a note that if they had won, we would definitely have started the show off with it, but unfortunately their season came up just short again. Baylor men's tennis team kind of, rounding out the sports that have come to a close. Men's tennis gets to the national title game and proceeds to fall to the Florida Gators 4-1. And they were in a really good position, and it's just like a switch flipped or something, and they went from having like a 2-1 lead overall and like having favorable or at least close matchups to like just you flipped a switch and like Florida just won everything. And so Florida 4-1, and they end up getting the win. So yeah, Baylor got the doubles point is what I was trying to think of. Got the doubles point early, and then was in good positions, and you all of a sudden looked away from the scoreboard and looked back like I did, and the little highlighted parts had swapped in the span of 10 minutes from pretty good looking odds for Baylor to, oh my gosh, Florida's gonna just sweep everything outside of doubles, which was what they did. And that's just a tough thing, a tough pill to swallow, knowing how badly this team wanted this, and the fact they also were runners up in indoor. So great season, overall, but also just short twice, and that's a tough pill to swallow, I'm sure. But what a year for Michael Woodson and company. Yeah,
I was so close to predicting it too, Craig. I had them beating TCU, then beating Tennessee, and then beating Florida. So close. Came up so close. It was tough. They won the doubles point, and so you think, man, they're in such a good position. But at every line, this Florida team was just a little bit better. They just were. It was pretty dominant what they were able to do in singles. They were very, very good on this day, and they were the best team in the nation, unfortunately. But Baylor was right there. Baylor made their run. Baylor got to the title game again. Like you said, they made it to indoor, lost to North Carolina, and now this one to Florida. But amazing season, Michael Woodson and company. Congratulations. I mean, this was a thrilling run all the way to the national title, and every Baylor fan was really rooting for them and hoping they could pull it out. Didn't happen, but you know what? I'm very happy with the trajectory of this program and where they're at, and very confident in their leadership under Michael Woodson.
Yeah, I am too. I think they'll be just fine. I mean, going to have to reload that roster a bit, and that's the one thing I'm curious about, because Brian Boland had such a big reputation in the tennis world, and, obviously had some things off the court that were problematic, but I mean, he came in and pretty much right away, not that Baylor's tennis program didn't have a great history, it's just that was a splash hire, and pretty much right away started getting big-time players. And so can Michael Woodson keep recruiting at a high level? That's going to be the key, is just, maintaining the talent level and maintaining the roster. So that'll be up next for him as they try to repeat and then get a couple extra wins, because, man, they were so close to being double national champs, and what a year that would have been for just Baylor Athletics as a whole. What a year it was anyways, but, that's why I was on the radio last week. We were discussing had tennis – I was saying if tennis were to win a national championship, I was asking where they would rank with Year of the Bear. And a bunch of people were like, well, Year of the Bear was better. And they said primarily because football was better, because football weighs so heavily, and I get that, but like, okay,
They still didn't win the Big 12 that year.
No,
like,
they didn't. But RG3 won the Heisman,
I know, yeah.
and so the Heisman weighed like super heavy. Although I'd rather have a Big 12 title, But so football had the advantage of just being good and also having the Heisman winner. But there was also the argument that they were just better on average across the board. And my whole thing was, if you win a national title in men's tennis and you wanted in men's basketball, and then you have all these Elite Eights and Final Fours, and then you had a title in A&T, like that to me is like the titles are so much more important than just being really good across the board. Mm-hmm. To me.
I agree.
And I think maybe some people who disagreed with me last week after watching tennis and what happened maybe changed their opinion, because you realize, like, man, what a great year. But at the end, man, it feels so empty because there's not like that satisfaction. You know what I mean? So that was really the point I was trying to drive home, was like, yeah, it's good to be consistently good. But, man, if you don't win that title at the end on occasion, like, it's fun, but it's not nearly as fun as winning championships is. You know what I mean? So that didn't end up happening anyways because they did not win. But it was an interesting little kind of thing we had discussed last week.
Yeah, I mean, that is, I saw some of the conversation on that, and I mean, it was trending in that direction. Had they won in tennis, I think it definitely would have been
three
close.
National titles,
I mean, and really the women's basketball team should have been the Final Four as well. So yeah, I mean, if you take that into account, but yeah, I mean, and then also the fact that I'm looking at this tennis team and I'm going, it's another what if scenario. Mm-hmm. But what if Jensen Brooksby had gotten to stay and actually play? I don't know if anyone's noticed this, but I just thought I'd point this out. He's currently the number 163rd player in the entire world
wow.
as a pro. I mean, he's won 3 ATP titles. I mean, the dude is unbelievable. And it's just like, man, if he was there one, he wouldn't have lost all year long. And then in tennis, that's such a big advantage because then, everyone moves down a line. So, I mean, you're talking, Adrian Boyden, who's number 21 in the world, would have been playing, or in college would have been playing the number 43 guy in the nation instead of number 7 or number 6. Right. So it would have meant a lot. They would have won the championship with him. So that's another what if scenario that just kind of bothers me, because we didn't even get to see him play in a Baylor jersey because he was hurt.
Yep. So unfortunate, but hey, they're trending in a good direction. So there's a well done to Michael Woodson and men's tennis on a fantastic year. So we're not going to be able to get to all the mailbag questions this week. We're just not. We don't have time, but we'll try to get to as many as we can right here, and we'll have to hold some back.
We'll move them to next week.
Yeah, well, I mean, because we're going to – I mean, there'll be some weeks where we're very light on news coming up, and so we'll have plenty of time. So I'm just going to go in order and get to as many as I can, and then just know that for those who don't get answered, we will carry them over. Joe Bear, bet your life savings on one of the options below. Which would it be? Baylor beats Iowa State in football. Baylor football holds OU under 30 points. Baylor football wins a Big 12 title within 3 years.
I'm not betting my life savings on any of these, but if I were to, it would definitely be Baylor football winning at home against Iowa State this year, for sure.
Yeah, I would say that as well. Yeah, holding Oklahoma under 30. I could see that, but that would be tough. Big 12 title, they're not close enough for me to start feeling good about that just yet. So, yeah, I would say probably beating Iowa State at home, as well as they play. I mean, I know it doesn't correlate last year to this year per se, but I'll go with that one as well. How good will Kansas men's basketball be this season? How does Baylor match up? Who will be the top dog of the Big 12? As always, thank you guys for the hard work. I look forward to listening to the podcast. Hey, Joe Bear, thank you very much for the questions.
Well, does James Akinjo get cleared? Does Matthew Meyer come back? Does Jared Butler come back? Those are the big questions, and you have them for Kansas as well, whether Agbaji, McCormick, Jalen Coleman-Lands. I think there's too many questions to really know who it is. Now, if you're going to ask me, okay, let's just pretend that everything runs chalk. So Jared Butler goes, Matthew Meyer stays, Akinjo gets cleared, they keep some of their guys. I still think Baylor's got a great shot at winning the Big 12. I really love the freshmen, Kendall Brown, Langston Love. I think LJ Cryer takes a big step up. So I think Baylor's got a good shot at winning the Big 12 again, but I do think Kansas will for sure be their biggest competition.
Yeah, appreciate the questions, Joe Bear. Kansas should be the favorite if things kind of go as is, which I'm expecting Jared Butler to be gone to the NBA. I'm expecting Matthew Meyer to come back. Just the way I'm expecting things to fall, I'm expecting Kansas to ultimately be the favorite to win it. Missing Bear. Rank the top 3 current Bears playing professional sports in MLB, NBA, or NFL.
This was a really tough question for me, and I feel like I'm probably missing people. But the first one on my list is Xavien Howard.
Yeah.
He's all-pro. He's on my list. I put Max Muncy on there. I think he's been playing really well this year for a few years now, so I'll go with him. And then the last one, I was kind of struggling, but thinking through the name, I think it's Royce O'Neal.
Probably.
Do you have someone else in mind? I was trying to.
Not from the NBA, not from baseball, and football-wise, there's not really anybody right now that jumps out to me now.
And Royce, I mean, they're the number 1 seed, and he's a major contributor. So
yeah, he's not their star, but he's a very well-respected and solid player.
Right.
So, yeah, I think Muncy and X are the 2 obvious. Those have to be in there. You know, if you open it up to the WNBA, like you start putting Brittany Griner in there.
Right,
and so, I mean, we could – but you asked about those 3 in particular, so I think that's probably the 3 I would go with as well would be Muncy, X, and then, I mean, you could – I guess it'd have to be Royce O'Neal. If you've got a better idea, though, we might be just blanking on somebody.
Missing,
might be blanking on someone, but I think that's pretty solid. H-Town Bear, you buying? Thank you, Missing Bear. H-Town Bear, you buying the Iowa State hype? I've seen them ranked as high as 7 in preseason polls. Seems really high for a program that has never won double-digit games in its history. Well, they're set up to. Are you buying the hype?
Yeah, I feel like that never winning a double-digit games in its history is kind of irrelevant because they were a double-digit win team last year. They got shorted 2 games because of the COVID season. So I don't buy into that. They were a 10-win team last year, even though they went 9-3. They won their bowl game. They were really good. I think they're going to be really good again, but I think it's going to be very similar. I think they'll probably be like 9-3. That's just the kind of program they are. I don't see them going 11-1. I'm thinking 9-3 or 10-2, probably playing Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship again. That would not really surprise me. But they have to go to Norman in the regular season. They go to Waco. They still got to play Texas. They still got to play Iowa, who they do horribly against. They always lose to Iowa. So I got them going 9-3, 10-2, which to me is not a top, 6 team. 7 seems a little high for me.
Yeah, I mean, if they're going to do it, it's this year. Brock Purdy's back. They've got tons of talent back. Campbell's back.
Matt Campbell's last year, probably. Purdy's last year.
For sure Purdy's. It should be Purdy's. Campbell, I mean, who the heck knows with this guy? I mean, who knows what he wants to do? I'm tired of hearing about him and why he's still in Ames or why he's not. But, I mean, this is the year they've been building up for. So if they're going to be top 10, top 5, then this would be the year to put the money on them. I buy it, but I don't think that they're like juggernauts. Does that make sense? I buy it, but they're not unbeatable, and they don't scare me in any way. But they should be about 10-game winners based on, just what's on paper. So thank you, H-Town Bear. A little yes, a little no. Doc Crow, what impact do you see the O-line transfers having in a statistical way? For example, another game in the win column, an extra yard per rush. Well, I think it can win you a couple games next year, a couple extra games. Next year is what it could potentially do. I mean, look back at last year, and there's a couple games they probably should have won if not for just horrific offensive play, which starts up front, extends to the quarterback, and then, just weaved its way through the entire offense, and then subsequently teamed by the end of the year. See the Oklahoma State game. What impact? I mean, I definitely think a couple extra wins if your offensive line is better. But what do you think?
Yeah, so, I mean, specifically asking about the transfers kind of is really a tough question when you think about the fact that they have a new offensive coordinator, they have a new offensive line coach. I mean, there's a lot of new parts here. It's not just, you brought in Grant Miller and Jacob Gaul. So, for me, I do think that obviously they help make the offensive line better, which could mean a game or two more wins. I will say, adding Jacob Gaul, if they can add another transfer, my optimism goes up. I've been saying I'm 8-4, but I'm leaning towards 7-5. I think if they can get one more starting transfer, I might be leaning more towards 9-3, which might be a little more bullish than I should be when you don't really know who the quarterback will be. I know, yeah, and that's fine. But I do think if you look at the stats, this team ran for 2.7 yards per carry. If they can't run for a yard more than that next year, they will not only be really bad again, that's really just a not good step in the right direction. They need to run for at least 3.5, probably closer to 4 yards per carry, especially when you get to play Texas Southern, Texas State, and Kansas all to inflate your numbers during the season.
I've never seen a team make 3rd and 1.5 look so unbearably difficult. Like
impossible.
Just make it look hard to do,
With one of the greatest sneaking quarterbacks I've ever seen, they still couldn't get first.
It's just, oh my gosh, I don't even want to think about it. But yeah, I think it, potentially makes the difference in, going to a bowl game or not, or winning a title or not. So not trying to put too much on it, but it should make a difference in a positive way. So we're winding down. I'll try to answer 2 more real quick. Dylan Reese, do you think potential NCAA penalties are going to set football back at all? I don't know. We got to see. Nobody really knows until we know. And so it's kind of hard to say yes or no without realizing what the actual punishment could be. Barring just something that's like them going out of their minds and just losing it and saying we're going to punish them to all hell. It should just kind of hurt. It shouldn't set them back. That's kind of how I view it. Does that make sense? But it all depends. What are we talking about? Are we talking about a couple scholarships for a couple years, which would hurt you, but you could fight through it? Or are we talking about them losing their minds and you lose 5 scholarships for the next 10,
right.
Until we know, it's kind of hard to say, unfortunately. And then Rusty Shack, day and time of and link to podcast for new members. And you mentioned this to him, but this airs the show, for those that don't know, YouTube 2 to 3 on Tuesdays, and then various times throughout the week as well. But YouTube 2 to 3 on Tuesdays.
And Apple Podcast, we did get that correct.
Yeah, and Apple Podcast as well, or wherever you get your podcasts. So that's where we're going to have to leave it. So Bear Love and Yankee, we will get to your questions next week. We'll stow those away, so just be patient with us there. But Rusty and Dylan wanted to sneak your questions in there. Hopefully that is satisfactory enough for you all for this week, but it's going to have to be because we don't have any more time. Grayson, anything before we go real quick?
No, just thank you all for your support. Obviously, Sikkim 365 wouldn't be here without y'all, so I'll leave it at that this week. Obviously, join premium side, listen to radio from 11 all the way through till 6. We got great content, great stuff if you're not a member.
Yes, we do. Thank you to Armstrong Sims as well. Thank you to our sponsors, Burt Colchin Ford and Waco since 1936. Also, WellMed Medical Management and USMD Health System. Dallas, I'm correct, Smoak. For Armstrong and Grayson, we appreciate you, and we'll get to your questions if we missed them on the podcast next week. Have a great one. Stay tuned to Sikkim 365 Radio and Sikkim365.com.